The PT-200 valve spring tester is a tester that is most heavily used by the top-level NASCAR and NHRA teams and engine builders. In fact, the wide majority of the NASCAR and NHRA championships over the past 15 years have been won with engines that had their valve springs set up using the PT-200 tester. We were also very fortunate to have Randy Dorton, Warren Johnson, and Buddy Morrison help us design and refine the original PT-200 valve spring tester. However, in addition to top racing teams, we also have many units in use at general quality-conscious machine shops. The reason for the PT-200's success, both in small shops and big shops, is that for less time than you spend using a manual tester, you get out much more accuracy and value for your customers. In fact, in less than 5 minutes of your time, with the PT-200, you go from a brand new set of valve springs to this table printout that shows you spring by spring exactly what your installed height needs to be for each spring to make your target seat pressure within 1 or 2 pounds. The printout also allows you to check seat and open pressures, and importantly, it also shows you with your camshaft exactly how much coil bind clearance you have for each spring. We'll now do a demonstration that shows you how quickly and easily you can fully measure and document a new set of valve springs. First, let's take a look at what you get with the PT-200. The PT-200 comes complete with a fully calibrated test frame and all the cables you need to connect to your desktop or laptop PC. The PT-200 uses a USB interface, making it very easy to install on your PC. And since the USB interface is guaranteed to always be present on new PCs, you'll always be able to use your tester on any new PC you may get down the line. The PT-200 also comes with a detailed manual that clearly explains how to fully test and document your valve springs, including how to remeasure them after teardown. Your PT-200 also includes free lifetime software updates and a full 1-year warranty. And unlike most of the other testers on the market, we use the best components available for the PT-200. For example, the load cell is INTEP certified to 0.1% basic accuracy and is designed for millions of measurement cycles, as is the high-quality length sensor. We have had many units in use literally 8 hours a day for over 10 years at facilities like Hendrick Motorsports and Iski Cams with 0 failures. When you start your PT-200 for the first time, this is how the screen appears. To make it easy to use without always referring to the manual, note that all the commands are located on the right of the screen, and you can either click them with the mouse or just hit the listed key on the keyboard. This makes it very easy to use the PT-200 if your hands are too greasy to use the mouse. Now let's place a spring on the PT-200, compress it, and see what happens. Note first that by hitting the F1 and F2 keys, you can zoom the maximum pressure up to as high as 1,500 pounds for Pro Stock springs, or down to as low as 100 pounds for small engine springs. But for this street strip spring, let's set it to a maximum pressure of 500 pounds. Now let's compress the spring, and note that we get a very accurate display of spring pressure, and unlike most manual testers, the yellow readout shows the absolute calibrated length of the spring, not just a relative compressed amount. So even just as a manual tester, the PT-200 is much more useful and easier to use than competing testers, and for a quick checkout of a spring, that's pretty handy. But the real power and speed of the PT-200 comes from using it in automatic mode, which we'll see next. Now by using automatic mode, let's see how quickly we can measure and set up a set of valve springs. Just place your springs next to the tester, intake and exhaust 1 through 8, and place intake spring 1 on the tester. Now just do a nice smooth compression on the spring. Note that since the machine's automating the measurement process, I don't have to try to stop at any specific installed height or pressure. Just do a nice smooth compression. Then hit the 2 key on your keyboard to go to intake spring 2, and do a nice smooth compression on that spring. Just smoothly take the spring down to coil bind. Now we're ready to measure spring 3. Hit the 3 key on your keyboard and smoothly compress that spring. I'll stop doing the measuring here, but I think you can see in just a couple minutes you can measure every spring in your set. Since this is the first time you've used the tester, it probably doesn't have the right camshaft lift information set for the camshaft you'll be using with a set of cylinder heads. So just look on the right hand of the tester and find the command to set your open lift, and either click on that button or hit the O key on your keyboard. Then enter in the correct intake and exhaust lift for this cam. Let's set it to 520 on the intake and 540 on the exhaust for this street strip camshaft. Now let's set the other important camshaft property. Note that we can see that the tester is currently set for a target seat pressure of 120 pounds, which is the pressure the spring exerts on the valve when the valve is on the seat. But the manufacturer of this camshaft recommends a seat pressure of 130 pounds. All we need to do to change it is look at the right side of the tester for the command to set the target seat pressure, click on that button or hit the B key, and enter in the correct target seat pressure of 130 pounds. Now that the target seat pressure has been correctly set, for every spring in the set, the tester will automatically find the correct installed height to make that target seat pressure, typically within 1 or 2 pounds. In the case of intake spring number 1, we can see that it needs to go in at an installed height of 1.820 to make that target 130 pound seat pressure. We can also see with the intake lift of 520 that we've got a load of 311 pounds on the spring when the valve is fully open. Another important measurement automatically made by the tester for each spring is the amount of coil bind clearance. This measurement is critical because if you try to run less than the manufacturer's recommended clearance, you can seriously damage your engine. In the case of intake spring number 1, we can see that at its current installed height of 1.820 and with a camshaft lift of 520, we've got 0.225 inches of coil bind clearance, which is plenty. Intake spring 1 now looks good. As we can see, we know exactly what installed height to put the spring in at to make the target seat pressure. We can also see with this camshaft lift that the open load looks good and we've got plenty of coil bind clearance. Now we just need to check all the other springs in the set. We only measured 3 springs in this example, but even with all the springs measured, you can see it just takes a few seconds to do your checks. A quick way to do this is to focus on one of the key parameters. In this case, let's look at the line that has the installed pressure and installed height. While you look at that line, just hit the I key repeatedly and it'll automatically index through all the intake springs. So let's check spring 1, looks good at 130. Go to spring 2, we got within 1 pound, which is pretty good. See a slightly tighter installed height on that spring. Go to spring 3, we're at 130. Again, slightly different installed height. Now let's go down and look at the coil bind clearance. Go back to spring 1. We're good at 225. Index to spring 2. Real good at 230. Go to spring 3. In a similar fashion, you'd go through the exhaust springs by hitting the E key. In a few seconds, you can make sure that the key parameters are correct for all the springs in your set. Now that we've verified that every spring in the set has been set up correctly, we're ready for the final step, which is to save this data set and then print out a table of the spring setup information to use in the cylinder head assembly area to install the springs on the cylinder head. Now to save the spring measurement set, just look in the right-hand menu for the command to save data and execute it. If you're doing engines for a lot of customers, it's a good idea to make a library name for each customer. In this case, we'll enter Smith and make a library. For the file name, we'll give it a name that makes sense for this engine. In this case, we'll call it Engine 1. Note that you can also add an additional comment. In this case, we're going to put in the comment field the fact that this is the first build for this engine. Hit the Save button, and now you've saved that data file. Now just execute the print command to generate the following spring printout. Note that spring by spring, it shows you exactly what the install heights need to be to make your targeted seat pressure. All the other important information we measured is also shown in the printout, so you can double check to make sure you've got sufficient coil bind clearance. Note that the other information you entered when you save the data file is also included on the printout, along with the date that the measurements were made. You can also place your company contact information on the top of the printout. It's always a good idea to print a second copy of this listing and include it with your cylinder head or engine to help promote your business and to show your customer that you took a lot of care in setting up their cylinder head. We've now reviewed the basic capabilities of the PT-200, and this concludes part 1 of the demonstration. What we've shown is that with less time than you spend using a manual tester, the PT-200 gives you much more accuracy in your valve spring setups, and the system automatically documents every head you build. In part 2 of the demonstration, we'll see how quickly you can remeasure a set of valve springs after the engine has been run by your customer. And we'll show how the PT-200 makes it easy to see if the springs can be reused, and if so, exactly how much you need to shim them. We'll also take a look at some of the other useful features of the PT-200. Thanks for watching this demonstration, and if you have any additional questions about the PT-200, please contact us.